Hold on.
Finally finished the sewing project from September. Is it perfect? No, but I'm gonna be delusional and pretend that it is.
This also has a cape. I'm just not wearing it currently. And I attach it with these little leaf brooches that I made. But I feel like that's a little too extra for a vendor at Comic-Con. I don't know yet. We'll see about it. We'll see. We should bring back capes. We should bring back capes. I live there. You're probably wondering why I'm in this silly little outfit. I made it. This was originally supposed to be my Halloween costume before I decided to do Esmeralda from Hunchback of Notre Dame. I'm thinking of wearing this to Comic-Con, being a little hobbit at my booth. I really wanted to cosplay, but I knew that I needed something that was easy to get in and out of. And also I wanted it to match the style of my art in general. And you can't tell me that I don't blend in. You can't tell me that. The only thing that would be kind of annoying in terms of it being a hobbit costume is that I don't have the ears, but I have too much hair anyway. So I think no one would know that I'm being a hobbit. And I lost the ring. I used to have a replica ring in high school. I think I got it at Hot Topic. Okay, it wasn't fancy. But I used to have it on my backpack like a keychain, and then one day it was gone. I don't know if it fell off or if someone stole it, but I don't have the ring anymore. Hobbit-ish costume aside, I'm feeling whimsical. Anyway, not only did I wear this to brag about the fact that I finished this, a costume which I would argue most seamstresses, most experienced seamstresses would look at and think mediocre. Not only did I choose to wear this to show you guys my cute little outfit as a little intro to my video, but also because I thought wearing a nice little lace-up corset top would be a good segue to what I'm going to be drawing today.
My original plan for this video was that I was just going to do a quick little spread with the art that I made in my last video, the Valentine's Day one. And I was going to use it on my sketchbook and just sort of show you guys how I plan out my colors and everything. And then I didn't even end up highlighting the thing that I was actually trying to focus on, but I think I ended up making something a little better. So here I'm just showing you guys the art that I made for Valentine's Day and all of the sort of related stickers that I have, and we're going to get right to it. I already knew going in that these pages were going to be thick because I was going to double them up because I already had stained pages with Sharpie, and also this sketchbook is starting to get real chunky and I wanted to just ignore 2 other pages. I decided to focus on these images first just because I thought they were more closely related. So I have the Addams Family, the Frankenstein and the Mermaid, and the 3 Candy Girls. This is a Valentine's Day themed sticker pack that I got when I ordered my last batch of stickers for the convention, and these are just stickers that I thought were related that I already had in my stash. I've said this before on social media because I think a lot of people think that I really prepare my pages in advance. I don't really do that unless I have an idea. And usually what I do is that I don't really consider what a spread is going to look like. I just try to pick colors that match together. If I want it to even be related, I usually don't actually. But since this was going to have a lot of themed images, I figured they should all match anyway. And I decided to draw something behind Frankenstein, so that I could have it be somewhat cohesive. And of course, I chose Hilda, the pinup girl, because I love her so much. I have had a bunch of images of Hilda saved up on my Pinterest for years because I know that I want to do a couple of master studies or recreations or something with her in it, and I never do. So I thought this was a good time to just go for it and draw it because it's just a little Valentine's Day spread, and I liked it so much that I really just want to do the same technique over and over and over again and just have an entire spread of just Hilda's. And I know it's probably hard to see because I'm using pencil over a very stained page, and so it kind of takes a while to carve it out, at least on camera, but this is usually how I draw bodies. If it's a really structured part of the body, like hands and finger placements, I try to use shapes like squares to sort of get everything settled in and make sure that it all makes sense. But for the most part, I use a lot of organic shapes, which I think helps if you're drawing someone who's really fleshy, like they have a fleshy little belly or big thighs. And since I usually draw people like that, it's kind of hard for me to draw angular things. Isn't time-lapse wild? I don't think it really took me that long to paint Hilda, but it's so fun to just watch it happen almost instantly on camera. Anyway, I was kind of at a loss for what to do with the second page, so I ended up just making a gingham pattern with washi tape and a purple Sharpie. I chose to do this and not another drawing because the heart shape was so big and wide that it really only had room for other stickers without looking awkward. And then I didn't really want to waste another spread of just 3 candy girls, and so I ended up just putting them together and sticking them to the inside of the sketchbook so that they can sort of pull out, and then I can read what's on the back. Doing things like this kind of helps me keep some of my digital art that I don't really have a lot of room for, and it also lets me have some journaling space. So this is the whole finished thing. I tried to do this one slower so you guys could see all the details, and I really like the way everything came out. The pink can be a little too much at times, but I didn't make those stickers. It's fine. And then here I'm going to show you guys how I stick the girls inside. So basically I had to do it twice because if you stick them together in a way that looks straight, it's actually not going to be straight when you open it like an accordion book. So you kind of have to stick them together in a U shape almost. And then that way when it opens, they stay straight and they don't pop out of the sketchbook. Like their little feet don't stick out, which is not what I wanted. So we're good. So yeah, that kind of tends to happen when you have an accordion fold thing. And here we're going to move on to the reason why this video is longer than I thought it was going to be. And that's the Sleeping Beauty page because I really changed gears. I was just going to do the same thing that I just did for my Sleeping Beauty page. And I was going to rant about my opinions on Sleeping Beauty and how I'm a Briar Rose / Aurora defender. But then I got an idea for an interactive page. So that's what we're going to do instead. I'm still probably going to rant a little bit, but that's for your entertainment. We'll get back to that, but besides that, the goal for these pages were interactive characters. So I wanted them to blink because most of the time when I make these kinds of pages, they are rolling their eyes or something. And I wanted to try something new. So we're just going to speed by how I draw these characters. And I also did Morticia because I wanted to get to the technique. Now, instead of telling you guys what materials I use, because I use the same ones every single time, I'm going to start complaining about how much I hate the Maleficent movie. This time-lapse might look a little choppy, but it's because I slowed it down just to complain about this. Now, if you were like me and you really like witches and all that stuff, you were probably really excited when they announced the Maleficent movie. Not because it was a live-action movie, since you love animation, but because you thought that they were going to finally expand on Maleficent's background.
Now shall you deal with me, O Prince, and all the powers of hell!
Obviously, Maleficent was always a fairy, not a witch, unlike popular belief, but clearly there was a darker connotation, so I thought we were going to get into it and see some villainy. Instead, what we got was a retelling where she was actually the good guy all along, and they made the other women in the movie look stupid. And that's something that I really can't stand by because in order to make a feminist retelling and give Maleficent more depth, what they did was take away actual parts of her character and also dumb down 3 other female characters. They took a story where 3 female characters sacrificed their magic in order to protect a girl for 16 years and made them incompetent. And people's main complaint with this movie is that Aurora is a passive character because she is asleep for half of the runtime, even though runtimes were shorter back then. But they also fail to realize that a big chunk of the movie involves these 3 women busting Prince Philip out of an evil lair so they can go save that little girl that they raised. They loved her. So my main problem with the Maleficent movie is that in order to prop up the villain, they had to completely erase the personality of Fauna, Flora, and Merryweather. And also, I don't really think they gave Elle Fanning much to do. Now, granted, I haven't watched the sequel or anything, but it kind of contradicts this idea that the Sleeping Beauty movie needed to be remade in order to give Aurora / Briar Rose more character because she's so passive. And mind you, I don't really necessarily agree with that either because the movie isn't that long, okay? And we all know that she was going to fall asleep. I don't know what else you guys wanted her to do. That being said, the hill that I die on is that I think if we're going to try to give more depth to her character, we could just talk about how freaking weird she is. Here's the thing about Briar Rose / Aurora. I like calling her Briar Rose better since that's what she was called for 16 years of her life. But think about it. I briefly mentioned this in my last video, but she was weird, okay? She's this medieval girl who was secretly a princess, raised in the woods. She walks around barefoot, talks to animals, and sings such beautiful songs that when Prince Philip first heard it, he was haunted by it and he didn't think it was a real human being. Let's also add to that the fact that she wasn't even raised by human beings either, and they weren't really all that convincing at pretending to be normal people. So I'm sure she probably learned some stuff from being raised by these 3 women in the woods that was just not right. And I have to reiterate that she had no other human contact. The first person she ever meets who are not the people that raised her is Prince Philip, who she claims to have had prophetic dreams about, if we take that literally. They say if you dream about something more than once, it's sure to come true. Girl, has this happened to you before? Plus, she was given the gift of beauty, which means that she has purple freaking eyes and red lips forever, no makeup on. Like, that girl is haunting. Why don't we talk about that? Anyway, rant over. Let's get to the tutorial. What the finished drawings look like, I did Morticia on one side and Sleeping Beauty on the other because those were the first 2 characters that came to mind in terms of like blinking their eyes wide awake. And I wanted to test out 2 different versions of this because I had never done this one before. Now, the first time I ever did an interactive page like this, which is where I have a character's eyes move back and forth, was actually an accident. So I messed up the eyeball and then I wanted to see if I could just draw it on the page behind it and make sure that no one would notice. And then I realized that if I taped it in a specific way that they would move. And I've been doing that for a while ever since because I think it's so fun, but I thought I would try to see if I can get the eyelids to sort of blink open. And this was more challenging than I initially thought it was going to be because anything can happen that'll make it look wonky. It's kind of, if you're going to try to do this, just know that it'll never be perfectly straight. And since I had never done this before, I ended up doing 2 different ideas. So one idea was that you cut out the eyelid from the original drawing so you don't have to draw the entire face again, at least not the eye space and the bridge of the nose. And then behind it, on a different piece of paper, you draw the eyeballs so that when you pull it up, the eyeballs are there behind the hole that you already cut out. And then the other way to do it is to just cut out an entire slice from the page and redraw the eyeballs, but with the eyeballs open so that when you pull it up, it completely changes the face again. Admittedly, none of these are as smooth as I would have liked, but I'm not animating. This is traditional pieces of paper, and I don't know why I thought it would be 100% smooth, but now that I know what went wrong, I think the next time that I do it, I'm going to do option number 1, which is the eyelid thing and not just the full face, and I'm going to put it on a bigger slice of paper so that it's stuck to the edges so that when I pull it, it doesn't move around, it doesn't wiggle around, and you don't have to futz with the eye placement. But I clearly did not know that at the time, so trial and error was important. A word of advice would be that if you're going to do option 2, which is where you cut out the entire part of the face, you are going to need to redraw it. So I would probably pick the one that is probably easier to redraw if you're going to do something like this. I had my light box, so I was able to just figure out exactly where everything was, except leave the eyes open, which is what I'm doing with Morticia. Another thing to keep in mind is the tone of the paper. I was a little dissatisfied with the reveal of the open eyes, not because I drew it incorrectly or because it didn't do what it was supposed to do, but because I drew it on a regular office piece of paper, whereas my paper in my sketchbook is toned and a little bit green. So it kind of looked a little off, but not too much that it annoys me and I want to redo it. All you really need to do either of these are whatever materials you're using to draw, and then a thicker piece of paper or cardstock for the back, tape, and an X-Acto knife. I use an X-Acto knife more than I use the scissors just because it's easier and it's cleaner. But if all you have is scissors, as long as you can find a way to cut out the shape you want without being too messy, go for it. Also, I'm not gonna lie. They look really spooky once you do either of these things. Once you cut out the face, or you cut out the eyeballs and they're just an empty socket, it tends to look weird. Now, if you decide to do the version that I'm doing with Morticia, where you cut out the eyes, what I would recommend doing is just to make sure that everything makes sense and it's aligned correctly. I tried to use markers or something to touch up any of the areas that might have looked weird after I cut it, just to make sure that it looks more seamless, even though this one doesn't really look that seamless because of the color. But, you know, this is your chance to sort of fix anything before you start gluing and taping. Or don't. I'm not your boss. You can do whatever you want. Heck, you can even do something where the different colors are funner. Maybe, I don't know, they're a bandit now and you gave them a little mask. I don't know. I'm not in charge. I did try to fix it. I did try to change up the color, at least give it a more yellow tone to fit and look more seamless. But that's because I didn't think about that until now doing this voiceover. But yeah, do whatever you want. I don't care. If I were to do this style of drawing again, I'm probably going to try to pick a character that doesn't involve so much rendering, so something more simplistic, or I'm probably going to try to find papers that already match the tone of my sketchbook before going in. But this was just an experiment to see if it would even work, so I'm cutting myself some slack. And you're going to see after this, but I'm just going to explain what I did. After I finished this sketch, I cut out that piece of paper and I stuck it to a cardstock paper that I already had because it's thicker, and so that it's right under the original image. So the original closed eyelids and then the eyeballs that are open, so that when you pull it up, and if you do it quick enough, it doesn't look that weird, or if like there's a longer space in between. If you're going to freehand it and not meticulously measure everything, which is what I usually do, I would at least trace the opening so that you know exactly where to glue everything. And another thing that I ended up doing differently for both of these images is that I'm not going to leave out a cardboard tab on the top like I do most of the time, where I leave a little cardboard piece so that I can pull it open. Because I feel like whenever I store it, at least the way that I store them, I have a little box with all of my little sketchbooks in them, and the cardboard tends to bend and it doesn't break. I've never had one of them break open or anything. I can pull it just as easy, but it's really crinkly and it's kind of annoying whenever you want to close a sketchbook with an elastic or a ribbon. So what I decided instead is that I just kind of cut open a little slit at the top of that cardstock, and then I put string through it so that I can just pull it on a string and it lays flat. You don't have to do it that way. You can just leave a tab if you're going to store it in a different way, or I'm sure that there are other ways that you can reinforce that cardboard, like putting duct tape on it or laminating that little tip that you have to pull on. But I wanted to do it this way just to see, because that's the name of the game. We're experimenting here today. Once I glued the original eyelid on the cardstock, I tried to make sure that the other piece of paper where the eyeballs are open make sense where they are, so it all lines up right. And if I were to do it again, I'd probably just make sure that I'm drawing both sides at the same time instead of just drawing the one thing, cutting up the slice and trying to really match that slice. I'd probably just do both at the same time just to make sure that everything makes sense and flows easier. But once again, I didn't think about that at the time. So instead what I did is that I put the page behind the original drawing, and then I traced the opening just to make sure that I was cutting and not cutting too far in so that there'd be like a lot of white space. But once I made sure that everything was lined up exactly where I wanted it to be, I just ended up gluing that piece of paper to the cardstock directly under the eyelids so that I could see what they would look like if I messed around with it before taping it in. That's always really important to do before taping it in. Otherwise, you end up with something really wonky and you have to use an X-Acto knife to cut the tape off of it, and you could end up breaking the original sketch. Do not recommend. I have done that before. So just make sure you do that before everything is glued or taped in. But I ended up setting it aside before just sticking the pages together so that I could work on the Sleeping Beauty one instead. And this was the different technique where I just cut out the eyelids with an X-Acto knife. With this version of the drawing, I don't really think you have to render the eyelids all that much. It's not like the Morticia one where you're directly cutting that one out so that you can keep it and redo it with the eyeballs open. I think with this one, you could honestly just take whatever piece of cardstock you like with a different color on it, and it could look like eye makeup or something, and then draw the eyeballs under that so that when you open it, it looks like it's blinking. But since I really liked the way that it looked, I ended up just cutting them out and gluing them to the cardstock behind it so that when it's closed, it just looks seamless and it doesn't look like there's a piece of paper under there, which I do like the look of. And you don't even really need to draw any eyeballs with this version either. She could just be having a Storm from X-Men moment and having these glowing white eyeballs. But as long as you know where the eyelids are, you're safe. One of the things that I think I could have done better in terms of this one, because this one is my favorite one out of the two techniques, is that I wish that I had kept the cardboard as wide as the sketchbook page like I did with Morticia, because there's less wiggle room. Because that's kind of what makes or breaks this technique. It's the wiggle room, because then you just have eyeballs that don't really connect where they're supposed to connect. I posted a video about this on TikTok when I was making it, and one of the comments that I got was that I should have drawn the eyeballs directly under, but because the image is slanted, I couldn't do that. I did test that out first just to make sure that everything was aligned properly, but I couldn't do that because then if you pull on it, one of the eyeballs you can see like the new eye before the other one. It's kind of like a weird reverse frog blink. Maybe if it was a straight on portrait, it could have worked. I'm not denying that. But for the position where Aurora is in now, where Briar Rose is sleeping, it just looked really weird. It looked like a haunted doll that can't blink right. Also, you just saw me put the string on the Morticia one, and I just want to make sure that if you guys do the string version and not leave out like a little tab to pull on, that you do it the way that I did it in this video, because if you do a knot, you're going to see it and it's going to feel weird. So and it's probably going to cause a lot of tension and pull on the cardstock. So just do it the way I did it. Don't do a knot. And now what I'm doing is that I am marking out exactly how big that little cardstock image is and how much room I need. Since it's pretty small, it's just the two eyelids, I don't need it to fit all of the page, which is good for me because it means that I can keep the space as tight as possible. And I ended up just marking down exactly where the pages needs to stick down so that when I move the tab around, I can move it freely on the top piece that isn't glued down and it doesn't have as much wiggle room. And I kind of wish that I had done this for the Sleeping Beauty one, because for that one, I ended up cutting a really small piece of paper and there's too much wiggle room. I wish I had done the exact same thing just with that technique. You can even see it now a little bit while I'm testing it, because if you move it around and it's not perfectly straight, you can still see all of the little white spaces and it ruins the illusion of the eye being closed in the first place. And before I glue the sketchbook pages together to keep it in place, I cannot be the only person that thinks that that little square does not look like the alien mom from Chicken Little. It's like her four-eyed sister. I can't unsee that now. Anyway, I tried to solve the whole wiggling issue by gluing the page as close as possible to the little space that I had left, but I don't really think that helped. I think if I do it again, like I said, I'm going to do it on a larger piece of cardstock so that there is no wiggle room and I can just glue or at least tape the edges of the sketchbook pages together and it'll be fine. As long as you keep the top piece open so that you can move that string around, you're good. I hope I'm being as clear as I possibly can. I need you guys to know that I do not film a script, and I think it shows. I kind of just make it and then try to figure out how I'm going to explain what I just did. And usually that's not a problem, but since this is sort of a tutorial if you want to do paper art, I apologize in advance for the fact that I'm really just out here rambling about a movie from the 1950s, and then when it's time to actually show you guys how to do what I'm doing, I'm just like, yeah, and then I glued it. I apologize in advance. I just hope that this makes sense. I also didn't think about it until literally right now, but if you don't want to do any of this, but you still want to have a fun sort of eyeball sketch interactive page, you could always just draw a different portrait under both of these and have like choose the middle ones to cut out stuff out of, and so then you have interactive pages where you can see the eyelids from the other page, kind of like those kids books that have like one set of eyeballs and a bunch of cut out animals, kind of like these. But I admit right now that they have the capacity to be so absolutely haunting to look at, but who are we if we don't at least try? And if you're wondering why I just had to open up the page after I already glued it down, I realized that the camera wasn't recording that bit until later. But essentially, when I moved the eyeballs around, I realized that if I close the eyelid, I didn't give it enough space at the top to pull it back out. So I just added cardstock to the top to make it longer, and then I put the slit in where I have the string. The best thing about making all of these interactive pieces is that, honestly, they can be so ugly on the inside. As long as nobody can see it, you're fine. Nobody will know unless you're like me and you're showing people. I ended up using a piece of washi tape because it's the first roll of tape that I found on my desk, and it's such a bad patch job. But literally, who is gonna see it? So I think that's great. And once I re-glued the pages back down, it was time to see if it actually worked. Like I said before, always test it, but sometimes even after you glue it, there's something a little bit off that you can't control anymore because you've closed it. It's over. And this isn't necessarily perfect. I'm still really proud of it, and I'm happy that I had this idea, and I'm really excited to do more pages like this. Maybe not necessarily in this sketchbook unless I get bored again because it's getting really chunky, but you never know. It's never going to be 100% perfect. Just know that going in. Another thing to really think about that I feel like I should have mentioned before, but I didn't, is that this really works best on characters that don't really have a lot of makeup, at least the Sleeping Beauty version, because you have to compensate for the fact that once you open the eyes, you got weird bottom lashes. So I tried to make the top of the eyeball as thick as possible to make it look like she had really thick top lashes and not just those weird spindly little bottom lashes, because this drawing was based off of Sleeping Beauty, and it's not like the 1960s mod or the 1920s looks that I do where they have really big eyelashes on both sides of the eyeball. So I had to compensate. And I think you can tell that I don't really know anything about makeup because I don't wear it, because I'm saying bottom lashes. Is that a thing that people say? Is that what they're called? Is there another term that I don't know about? This section of the video very quickly stopped being a tutorial and just started being a video where I talk about all of the little things that I could have done better. So just learn from my mistakes if you try to do this, and watch the full video because I do fix some things in between. So don't try to follow it step by step. There are no steps. I'm telling you the way it is, the way I'm doing it. I am very clearly making it up as I go along, and that's kind of how I tend to live my life in this sketchbook. Not in real life. In real life, I'm an anxious mess. But in my sketchbook, yes. So just know that this is not a step-by-step. Please listen to what I did wrong so that you don't do it, and it looks prettier in yours. Once I was satisfied with everything, I took a clear piece of tape and I put it on the edges that were supposed to stay closed so that if something happens to the glue, it won't just open up and I won't lose what I just drew. And then I sliced the pieces of string so that they were in the same length. You don't have to do this. I just ended up doing it like that because in my opinion, it looks better when it's cut to the same length. But at the same time, I used a really old, ugly piece of string, and it's the string that we use when we're making pasteles. So if I used ribbons, maybe I would have had a different opinion. I don't know. By this point, I was technically done. I finished both of the girls, but I wanted to get rid of the rest of the leftover Valentine's Day stickers that I had, so that's what we're going to do now. At the start of the video, I had mentioned that I kind of went off the rails, and it's because originally I really wanted to use the Sleeping Beauty drawings that I had made on Procreate in my Valentine's Day video on this spread. I wanted to do the same thing that I did with the Candy Girls and do like an accordion fold with the 3 images that I had made and put it in the middle. But because it came out so bulky and I don't really care all that much for the Sleeping Beauty drawings that I made. I ended up just scrapping it all together and just putting the leftover Sleeping Beauty sticker on the back and calling it a day with this spread. How I went from gluing down images I already made to making an interactive page that blinks, I don't know, but I did that. I just wasn't all that satisfied with the drawings that I had made, and I don't think I'm ever going to include them in the sketchbook unless I am 100% okay with the redesign. Despite all that, I'm still pretty happy with the art that I had made. Some of it isn't perfect, but I'm just happy that this idea could get out of me because it was driving me a little nuts. So these are all of the pages that I worked on in one sitting. Let me know if this is something you guys would actually consider doing in your own sketchbooks, and if you did one and not the other, why?
So yeah, thank you for watching. I don't usually film intros and outros. I don't know what it is. Most of the time I forget about it, and other times I feel kind of embarrassed. But I do really want to post more videos here more often, like more art content, more art vlogs specifically, since I'm going to be doing more conventions and stuff, more artsy related things more often, because sometimes I don't post for months at a time. And it's not like I have that many views, but I do really want to focus on putting my art out there, even if it's just a personal challenge. And so if you guys would like to subscribe or like a video, that would be nice. If you guys want to see more art, you can always check out the other videos. That would also be nice. And if you guys want to see me anywhere other than YouTube, I pretty much go by Gabby the Esotis on everything. I'm gonna have the links in the little description box, and any other links that you might need, like my Etsy store. Please check out my stickers. I did a little update, and I want people to get them before I go back on vacation mode when I do my convention again in April, and before I leave the country also in April. So please check out my stickers. They're cute. They're cute, and no one is seeing them because I suck at marketing, but they are cute. I'm just saying, I would trust a woman dressed like she lives in a Renaissance fair. This is the most feminine it's gonna get. This is peak femininity for me. A woman who is currently wearing boys' shorts under this right now. This is it. Like, I never wear dresses or skirts or heels or makeup in my day-to-day life. So when I choose femininity, of course it's rosy cotton core.